Yuan Shikai had an appetite for power, for control, and, as legend has it, for food. It's said he didn't just eat, he feasted, turning every meal into a theatrical display of his own dominance. While history tells us he died of kidney failure, it's impossible to separate his physical decline from his lifestyle of excess. The story of his gluttony became the perfect metaphor for his spectacular downfall. This isn't just a story about a failed emperor. It's about how one man's personal demons can become a national tragedy. To understand how a man could crown himself emperor in the 20th century, you have to understand the world that created him. At the turn of the 1900s, China was a giant on its knees. The Qing Dynasty, rulers for over 250 years, was rotting from the inside. Foreign powers were carving up the country like a melon, while rebellions and famine tore through the countryside. It was an empire in twilight, desperate for a new dawn. Into this chaos stepped Yuan Shikai. Born in 1859, Yuan wasn't a scholar. He flunked the big civil service exams twice and decided that in a world on fire, a sword was more useful than a pen. He joined the military and his talent was immediately obvious. He was pragmatic, ruthless, and he understood something most of his peers didn't. The future would be one with modern armies, not ancient traditions. His first big assignment was in Korea, where he was sent to train its army and push back against rising Japanese influence. It was there he mastered the art of political maneuvering, playing factions against each other and making a name for himself. When he returned to China, he was given a crucial task: create the new army, a modern fighting force. This army became his personal power base, loyal not to the crumbling dynasty, but to him. Yuan was a walking contradiction. He played the part of a loyal servant to the powerful Empress Dowager Cixi, yet he also believed China had to modernize or die. He was a reformer with an iron fist, a modernizer who knew how to use the ancient levers of power. The breaking point came in 1911 with the Wuchang Uprising. As revolution swept across the country, the terrified Qing court knew only one man could save them. They begged Yuan Shikai to come out of retirement and lead his new army to crush the rebels. Yuan agreed, but he played a masterful double game. He fought the revolutionaries just enough to prove he couldn't be beaten. Then he started negotiating with them. The leader of the revolution, Yat-sen, was the provisional president of the new Republic of China. But Sun had ideals. Yuan had the guns. A deal was struck. Yuan would convince the last emperor, the child Puyi, to abdicate. In return, Sun would step aside, and Yuan Shikai would become the first president of the Republic of China. In February 1912, the deal was done. Over 2,000 years of imperial rule ended with the stroke of a pen. Yuan Shikai, the shrewd general, was now in charge. As president, Yuan presented himself as the steady hand China needed. But behind the scenes, his hunger for total control was ravenous. The new republic had a constitution and a parliament, but Yuan saw them as annoyances. When the 1913 elections gave a landslide victory to Sun Yat-sen's party, Yuan's response was swift and brutal. The party's chosen premier was assassinated, a hit widely blamed on Yuan's loyalists. This was the beginning of the feast. Yuan started devouring the young republic from the inside out. He took out massive foreign loans to buy loyalty, dissolved the parliament, and rewrote the constitution to give himself almost dictatorial power. The revolutionaries who had dreamed of a Chinese democracy were now his enemies. He crushed a second revolution and forced leaders like Sun Yat-sen to flee the country. His political greed was mirrored by his personal life. Legends of Yuan's excesses grew. While the average person struggled, Yuan's tables were piled high with lavish feasts. He was said to consume incredible amounts of food with a special love for rich, fatty dishes. It wasn't just indulgence, it was a performance. To feast like an emperor was to feel like an emperor, a declaration that all the resources of the nation were his to consume. His ambition just kept growing. He convinced himself that China wasn't ready for a republic, and that only a strong monarch could keep the country from falling apart. His supporters and even some foreign advisors cheered him on, arguing that the Chinese people were conditioned by centuries of tradition to respect an emperor. The final push came in 1915. With Europe distracted by World War I, Japan hit China with the humiliating 21 demands, which would have made China a Japanese puppet state. Yuan, needing Japan to approve his plan to become emperor, agreed to a version of the demands. For many Chinese, it was the ultimate betrayal. With that sorted, he made his final move. His supporters organized spontaneous petitions, where everyone from students to governors unanimously begged him to restore the monarchy with himself on the throne. On December 12, 1915, after a dramatic show of refusing, then reluctantly accepting, Yuan Shikai declared himself the Hongxian emperor. He had finally swallowed the republic. Yuan Shikai had reached the absolute peak of his power. He'd outmaneuvered his rivals, crushed his enemies, and put a crown on his own head. But as we're about to see, the moment of his greatest triumph was also the beginning of his rapid demise. If you want to see how this self-made dynasty collapses, make sure you're subscribed because you won't want to miss what happens next. The backlash was immediate and catastrophic. Yuan had completely misjudged the mood of the country. The Chinese people hadn't gotten rid of one dynasty just to get a new one. Even his own military, the bedrock of his power, started to crack. On Christmas Day 1915, just 2 weeks after he declared his new empire, the governor of the southern province of Yunnan declared independence, starting the National Protection War. One by one, other provinces and military commanders joined the rebellion. Many of these men were Yuan's own protégés, guys he had promoted and trusted. Now they saw his ambition as a threat to their own. His attempt to unite China was tearing it apart. The empire was a total disaster. Foreign powers, including Japan, saw how weak he was and pulled their support. The armies he sent to crush the rebellions were defeated. The man who once commanded absolute loyalty was now isolated and alone. Under the immense stress, his health, already fragile from his lifestyle, began to fail. While the legend of him eating himself to death is a powerful metaphor, the historical record points to a more clinical killer, uremia, a severe kidney disease. But you can't really separate the disease from the man. His body, like his empire, was collapsing under the weight of its own excesses. Humiliated and facing opposition from everyone, Yuan had to make a shocking reversal. On March 22, 1916, after a reign of just 83 days, he officially abolished his own monarchy. But it was too late. His enemies didn't just want him off the throne, they wanted him out of office entirely. The rebellion raged on. He had lost everything. Yuan Shikai died on June 6, 1916, at the age of 56. He died a broken man, his imperial dream in ruins, and the country he claimed he was saving was about to plunge into chaos. Yuan Shikai's death didn't restore the republic. Instead, it left a power vacuum that his generals scrambled to fill. The new army he had built splintered into factions led by competing warlords. For the next decade, China was torn apart by civil war in a bloody chapter known as the Warlord Era. The man who promised order had become the father of the warlords. So, what is Yuan's legacy? He's still one of the most controversial figures in modern Chinese history. Some see him as a modernizer who helped end the Qing dynasty. But for most, he's the ultimate symbol of failed ambition. A man who betrayed a revolution and whose personal hunger for power plunged a nation into darkness. In the end, Yuan Shikai's insatiable appetite for food, for luxury, and for absolute power consumed everything. He tried to swallow a nation, but it was his own ambition that devoured him, leaving scars on China for generations to come.